seeing you, Kate. See, comics in the real world. What makes Omaha the cat dancer for mature readers only is primarily the frisky feline sex. That's also what got it into trouble with the censors. I hear the police in Toronto have been raiding comic book stores and seizing comics, including Omaha. It's funny, the police think they're doing the right thing, the people who want the comics banned think they're doing the right thing, and the comic book creators think they're doing the right thing. So who's the villain? That same ironic view of villains and heroes is the other thing that makes Omaha a mature comic. Every character does what they think is right, and chaos and heartbreak ensue. It's even happening in mainstream comics. I know Steve Bissett. Steve has written and drawn and edited and published comics. He's worked in alternative and mainstream comics for a decade, and he's been censored too. Steve, it's Rick. I just talked to Kate Worley about power and corruption. Why have comics developed a more realistic view of good and evil?
I can't help but see it as sort of fallout from the Watergate era. I grew up as a child of the 60s. I was born in 1955. I was raised with that elementary school ethic of, you know, God, Mom, and apple pie, and the president is someone to be revered. And at the age I was at when JFK was killed, I mean, I didn't understand that JFK was not well liked and suddenly martyrized because he was killed. It was just sort of, he was preferred as C, you know, and it wasn't unusual in Catholic households. I was raised Catholic, that Christ and JFK would be side by side, which just reinforced this whole myth. You know, as an American, I can't describe to you on every level of my life and the world around me how Watergate altered that. Suddenly, the president was the bad guy, and sorting out who the so-called bad guy was a matter of unraveling these knots and all this Machiavellian scheming that had gone on. And I think that's what we're seeing in the superhero books. Using Watchmen as the example, which is a perfect example. There was no villain per se at the beginning of Watchmen. There was no Lex Luthor. There was no you know, arch enemy or arch foe who was clearly defined as being such. It was a matter of sorting through all these characters to find out who it was that was the great schemer behind all these tragic and dangerous events that were going on.
Thanks, Steve. Comics are reflecting real-life heroes and villains. Watergate, Iran-Contra, Meech Lake. One person's savior is another person's devil. RoboCop is no different from the Terminator in his methods. He just serves a different master.
I think the problem with villains is when you get to know them too well, they're us too. You know, it's like the whole thing about good and evil. There isn't good and there isn't evil, there's people. To go back to Good Omens, the novel, there's a point in there where we have the demon Crowley reflecting that the problem with people is that a human being can do an act of goodness that astonishes, that will put an angel to shame. And a human being can conceive of doing nasty things and do nasty things, which are worse, things that would revolt even the lowliest demon. And the problem with that is sometimes it's the same person.
Neil's right, of course, but there's always an exception. In this case, the serial killer, horror's last bastion of black, heartless evil.
Do not touch the glass. Do not approach the glass. You fancy nothing but soft paper. No pencils or pens. No staples or paper clips in his paper. He is the sliding truth carrier, no exceptions. If he attempts to pass you anything, do not accept it. Do you understand me?
I understand, sir.
I'm going to show you why we insist on such precautions. On the afternoon of July 8, 1981, he complained of chest pains and was taken to the dispensary. His mouthpiece and restraints were removed for an EKG. When the nurse leaned over him, he did this to her. The doctors managed to reset her jaw, more or less, save one of her eyes. His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
Yeah, oh, geez. Silence of the Lambs was Thomas Harris's second book featuring Dr. Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter. Check out the first novel, Red Dragon. It's... Lunatic murderers are everywhere these days. Stephen Sondheim co-wrote an off-Broadway musical called Assassins. Oswald and Hinckley sing and dance their way into your heart. The critics killed it. And then there's the big publishing brouhaha about the gratuitously grisly novel American Psycho. Detailed dismemberment masquerading as story. Waste of good paper. You want a real read? Check out Peter Straub. He's written about serial killers in Coco, Mystery, and his upcoming novel, The Throat. Peter, it's Rick. Why the fascination with serial killers?
Well, I want to know how they got that way. What makes somebody do that? It's so, it's a striking aberration. We didn't used to have them, and all of a sudden now we got dozens of these affectless, impenetrable characters who every now and then start feeling a little funny, get in their car, and start trolling. It's enigmatic. I mean, now, so I've done tons of reading about these people, and I've thought about them a lot. And for me, the sad reality is that in real life, they're boring. They're not interesting. All they have is anger that they cannot control. They also have immensely loused-up childhoods. Most of them were physically and mentally abused nonstop, and never learned to handle the anger. So they just walled it up, and every now and then they start feeling funny, and it's time to go out and do it again. They feel remorse afterwards, or they forget it. But they don't have the sort of richness of interiority that I want them to have. You know, I'm looking for something a little more psychologically complex. It's so transgressive. The action is so outrageous that there's a sort of built-in color, I guess, and that's part of the reason I'm interested.
Thanks, Peter. Knock 'em dead. The serial killer might well be the perfect villain for this age of greed. He's the ultimate consumer, a consumer of lives. But if the shop till you drop mentality comes from spoiled childhoods, the serial killers are almost always the product of a horror-filled home life. That was the case of Anthony Cross, a serial killer in Garfield Reeve Stevens' novel Dark Matter. Check it out. Gar also wrote about my favorite villain, the Joker, in his story called Masks. You can find it in an anthology called The Further Adventures of the Joker. Now, Gar just sent me a video letter. I know I'm being jammed again. The bad guys want what I want. This channel, Nancy, juice the signal 50%. Anyway, Gar has a fascinating theory on the power and the appeal of the Joker.
The thing about the Joker, which is so compelling and which makes him so right for the 90s, is that he's not the type of villain who wants something. There's no motivation. The serial killers are very popular in fiction now because people are intrigued by them and they're afraid of them because there's nothing you can do to protect yourself against a serial killer because there's no motivation. Most murders take place, the murderer knows the victim. And we can understand that. We can console ourselves by saying, well, I don't know any murderers, so I'm safe. But the serial killer comes out of nowhere, kills somebody at random, and goes away. That's frightening. The Joker is that kind of villain. He's chaos personified. Batman, to fight the Joker, has to tread that fine line, get almost over into becoming a creature of chaos himself. And that's about it for the Joker. Take care, and see you later.
Econ Second Nature sperm banks, facing new competition from sperm trust companies. Plus, the zebra. Do vertical stripes make them look thinner?